Hello, welcome to a new segment on the YouTube channel for the Count of Monte Cristo. For those of you that have never read this book, you're in for a treat. This is a very, very, very good, fascinating book. It's got a lot of adventure. It's got a lot of misfortune. Uh, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did when I was a kid as well. It's got a lot of kind of like Frenchy words that I am gonna mess up here and there. Bear with me, okay? I read this when I was a kid and I mispronounced it back then also quite a bit, all right? Funny enough, I came from a immigrant family background, so I didn't speak the best English back then. Um I think when I was about like 3rd or 4th grade, I was put into a lot of reading, like remedial reading secondary classes after school and stuff like that, where they made me just read like a ton of books to try and get me used to it. Which is what kind of like got me on like a lot of my kind of like reading adventures quite a bit. Mostly just because, like, at the time, they wanted me to kinda, like, grasp English a little bit better, because I was speaking Spanish or Spanglish, so I was mixing up a lot of words and stuff like that, uh, and it ended up, helping out quite a bit. I ended up reading a lot of books. I think by my middle school years, I was reading, like, college level books, um, but I always refused to, like, get the grades, if that makes any sense. I was always afraid of setting people's expectations really high when it came to, like, school. I hated the idea of getting straight A's. That sounds really weird for some people, because like, some people, it's like, "Oh, straight A's, we must do this for" like, "Our family forces us to do this," and shit like that, or your parents probably, like, whoop your ass probably if you got really terrible grades. Yeah, well, I got my ass whooped a couple of times, don't get me wrong, but I ended up learning that, like, keeping a very C above C, grade average, I tended to kinda, like, just, mosey on by. I was able to kinda slack off, but, like, pass all my classes, and I just did not give a fuck after that. I just maintained a C average the whole ride through. But yeah, I kinda did a lot of my studying off on the side. I would visit, like, the library, like, every fucking day, and I would check out, like, 10 books sometimes. I remember, the librarian too was kinda, like, surprised at, like, how much I used to, check out quite a bit, because it wasn't just books. One thing, my brother, used to take me, to rent, movies as well, because back in, like, early 2000s, DVDs and, like, VHSs were still, like, a pretty big thing, you know? But that's where I got a lot of, like, my film, uh, knowledge from, because I would check out just a lot of random films, a lot of them being, like, old school films, a lot of classic films, but, yeah, I just from a kid, I was just watching all that stuff. I didn't realize that, like, there were, like, film courses completely dedicated to this kind of thing, but, like, I just enjoyed watching that stuff. And I loved kinda just, discovering new genres and new techniques. It wasn't until I got to college that I got into, like, the technical side of film, and film, making and stuff like that, like camera work. When I started doing storyboarding, I started like understanding like camera positioning and like lenses and how important that is as well. So like, yeah, there's a lot. Composition is such a it makes sense why there are schools completely dedicated to composition alone. Like you can look up documentaries, you can look up film movies like that are 5 hours long that can just describe composition nonstop, because it's such a like in-depth study. There's so many different things that you can learn from different films just by watching them. And I think it's especially so from like old films, like silent films, black and white films. If you go far enough back, you're looking at the conception of when these pioneers were figuring it out in the moment. They didn't have people to tell them or instruct them like how to do these things, which is the most fascinating part, because like these were like literal geniuses in the business at the time. These guys were problem solving stuff that like nobody had encountered before. And it's so odd to think. I really wish that there were like documentaries or old school like interviews um about these directors and like talking about their experiences working in filmmaking. I know there's books like Charlie Chaplin. I know he has a autobiography, I think. Um but sometimes in like really rare autobiographies, you'll sometimes get like some of these old directors talking about like how they would just like do random little techniques on like how they used to do things. One I know that's very controversial is D.W. Griffith. Griffin? Oh, I forgot exactly what his name was, but yes, very well known racist. But filmmaking wise, very good technically. And I think in one of his books, he talks about like how he used to problem solve getting like a lot of shots for a lot of films. You start looking at like a lot of like pioneers of the industry. Like one of the interesting times was when color was really starting to play into like film industry. You get movies like Gone with the Wind, phenomenal coloring on that. Oh my god! One of these days, I'd love to do a watch party for Gone with the Wind. Uh, but again, it's a story that's kind of like a little racy as well. But like technically, it like the technical aspect of like that filmmaking is phenomenal. It's so nice, and they have like remasterings of it too, or recolorings where like they still maintained like that same kind of like vignette of the film that they had back then. They just kind of like touch it up here and there to kind of like make it look a little bit nicer. Really, really nice remastering though. I've seen it in I think I saw it a couple years ago in one of my film classes. But yeah, definitely worth checking out. All right. Oh my god, I'm recording this for YouTube. I'm so sorry, YouTube. Skip to this part right here. This is where the story is officially going to start. So, the Count of Monte Cristo. I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1. Marseille's The Arrival. On the 24th of February. Oh, it's almost the 24th of February now, isn't it? Holy shizies. I didn't realize that. Okay. 1815. The watchtower of Notre Dame de la Garde signaled the arrival of the three master pharaohs from Smyrna, Triste, and Naples. That is Simrina? Simrina. The usual crowd of curious spectators immediately filled the quay of Fort Saint Jean, for at Marseilles the arrival of a ship is always a great event, especially when that ship, as was the case with the Pharaon, has been built, rigged, and laden in the dockyard of old Pokeia. Pokeia? Pokeia? Pokeia. Pokeia. And belongs to a ship owner of their own town. Meanwhile, the vessel drew on and was approaching the harbor under topsails, jib, and foresail, but so slowly and with such an air of melancholy that the spectators, always ready to sense misfortune, began to ask one another what ill luck had overtaken those on board. However, those experienced in navigation soon saw that if there had been any ill luck, the ship had not been the sufferer, for she advanced in perfect condition and under skillful handling. The anchor was ready to be dropped, the bowsprit shrouds loose. Beside the pilot, who was steering the Pharaon, through the narrow entrance of the port, there stood a young man, quick of gesture and keen of eye, who watched every moment of the ship while repeating each of the pilot's orders. The vague anxiety that prevailed among the crowd affected one of the spectators so much that he could not wait until the ship reached the port. Jumping into a small boat, he ordered the boatman to row him alongside the Pharaon, which he reached opposite the creek of La Reserve. On seeing this man's approach, the young sailor left his post beside the pilot and, hat in hand, leant over the ship's bulwark. He was a tall, lithe young man of about 20 years of age with fine dark eyes and hair as black as ebony. His whole manner bespoke that air of calm resolution peculiar to those who, from their childhood, had been accustomed to face danger. "Ah, this is you, Dantes," cried the man in the boat. "You are looking pretty gloomy on board. What has happened?" "A great misfortune, Monsieur Morel," replied the young man. "A great misfortune, especially for me. We lost our brave captain, Leclerc of Civita Beresini." "What happened to him?" asked the ship owner. "What has happened to our worthy captain?" "He died of brain fever and dreadful agony. Alas, monsieur, the whole thing was most unexpected. After a long conversation with harbor master, Captain Leclerc left Naples in a great state of agitation. In 24 hours he was in high fever and died 3 days afterwards. We performed the usual burial service. He is now at rest off the Isle of Giglio. Giglio? Sewn up in his hammock with a 36-pounder shot at his head and another at his heels. We have brought home his sword and his cross of honor to his widow. But was it worth his while, added the young man with a sad smile, to wage war against the English for 10 long years, only to die in his bed like everybody else? "Well, well, Monsieur Edmond," replied the owner, who appeared more comfortable with every moment. "We are all mortal, and the old must make way for the young, otherwise there would be no promotion. And the cargo?" "Is all safe and sound, Monsieur Morel. Take my word for it, it has been a voyage that will bring you in good 25,000 francs." As they were just past the round tower, the young man shouted out, "Ready there, young topsail, foresail, and jib!" The order was executed as promptly as on board a man of war. "Lower away and brail all." At this last order, all the sails were lowered and the ship moved on almost imperceptibly. "And now, Monsieur Morel," said Dantès, "here is your pursuer, Monsieur Danglars, coming out of his cabin. If you will step on board, he will furnish you with every particular. I must look after the anchoring and dress the ship in mourning." The owner did not wait to be invited twice. He seized a rope with Dantes flung to him, and with an agility that would have done credit to a sailor, climbed up the ladder attached to the side of the ship, while the young man, returning to his duty, left the conversation to the individual whom he had announced under the name of Danglars, and who now came towards the owner. He was a man of 25 or 26, of unproposing countenance, obsequious to his superiors, insolent to his subordinates, and besides the fact that he was the pursuer, and pursuers are always unpopular on board, he was personally as much disliked by the crew as Edmond Dantes was beloved by them. "Well, Monsieur Morales," said Danglars, "you have heard of the misfortune that has befallen us." "Yes, yes, poor Captain Leclerc. Yeah, he was a brave and honest man, and a first-rate seaman, grown old between sky and ocean, as a man should be who is entrusted with the interest of so important a firm, and as that of Morel and Son," replied Danglars. "But," replied the owner, said watching Dantes at his work, It seems to me that a sailor needs not be so old to understand his business. Our friend Edmund seems to understand it thoroughly, and to require no instructions from anyone. Yes, said Danglars, casting a look of hatred on Dante's. Yes, he is young, and youth is never lacking in self confidence. The captain was hardly dead when, without consulting anyone, he assumed command of the ship and was the cause of our losing a day and a half off the Isle of Elba, instead of making direct for Marseilles. As captain's mate, it was his duty to take command, but he acted wrongly in losing a day and a half off Elba, unless the ship was in need of repair. The ship was as right as I am and as I hope you are, Monsieur Morel. It was nothing more than a whim on his part, and a fancy for going ashore that caused the delay off Elba. Dantes called the owner, turning towards the young man. Just step this way, will you? One moment, monsieur, he replied, and I shall be with you. Then turning to the crew, he called out, Let's go! The anchor was instantly dropped, and the chains ran out with a great rattle. In spite of the pilot's presence, Dantes remained at his post until his last task was accomplished. And then he added, Lower the flag and pennant to half mast and slope the yard. You see, said Danglars, he already imagines himself captain. And so he is, said the companion. Why should we not give him the post? I know he is young, but he seems to be an able and thoroughly experienced seaman. A cloud passed over Danglars' brow. Your pardon, Monsieur Morel? Said Dantes, approaching. Now that the boat is anchored, I am at your service. I believe you called me. Danglars retreated a step or two. I wish to know the reason of the delay off Elba. I am unaware of the reason, monsieur. I am followed the last instructions of Captain Leclerc, who, when dying, gave me a packet for Marshal Bertrand. And did you see the Marshal? Yes. Morel glanced around him and then drew Dantes on one side. How is the Emperor? He asked eagerly. Very well. So far as I could see, he came into the Marshal's room, and while I was there, did you speak to him? It was he who spoke to me, monsieur, said Dantes, smiling. He asked me some questions about the ship, about the time of her departure for Marseilles, the route she had followed, and the cargo she carried. I believe that had she been empty and I the master, he would have brought her, or bought her. But I told him I was only the mate, and that the ship belonged to the firm of Morel and Son. Ah, he said, I know the firm, and Morals have been ship owners for generations. And there was a Moral who served in the same regiment with me when I was garrisoned in Valence. Quite true, Monsieur Morel exclaimed, delighted. It was Policar Morel, my uncle, who afterwards became a captain. Dantes, you must tell my uncle that the Emperor still remembers him, and you will see tears of joy in the old soldier's eyes. Well, well, he added, giving Dantes a friendly tap on the shoulder. You were quite right in carrying out Captain Leclerc's instructions and putting in at the Isle of Elvas. Though, if it were known that you delivered a packet to the Marshal and talked with the Emperor, you might get into trouble. How so? Said Dantes. I don't even know what the packet contained, and the Emperor merely made such inquiries as he would of any newcomer. But, excuse me, monsieur, for one moment. There are the medical and customs of officers coming on board. As the young man departed, Danglars approached. Well, said he. It would seem that he has given you good reason for dropping anchor off Port Farango. Most satisfactory one, dear Monsieur Danglars. So much the better, replied the pursuer, for it is never pleasant to see a comrade neglect his duty. Dante certainly did his, and there's nothing more to be said on the matter. It was Captain Leclerc who ordered him to call at Elba. Talking of Captain Leclerc, hasn't Dante's given you a letter from him? No, he was there one for me. No, was there one for me? I think that in addition to the packet, Captain Leclerc gave him a letter. What packet do you mean, Danglars? The one Dante's delivered at Porto Ferraggio. How do you know that he had a packet for Porto Ferraggio? Danglars turned red. I was passing the captain's door, which was ajar, and saw him give Dante's the packet and the letter. He was not mentioned he had not mentioned a letter to me, but if he has one, I've no doubt he will give it to me. Then, Monsieur Morel, pray don't mention it to Dantes. Perhaps I am mistaken. Just then the young man returned to Danglars, retreated as before. Well, Dantes, have you finished now? Yes, monsieur. Then you can come and dine with us. I beg you to excuse me, Monsieur Morel. I owe my first visit to my father. I am all the same. I greatly appreciate the honor you pay me. You are quite right, Dantes. I know you are a good son. And do you know if my father is quite well? He asked with some hesitation. Oh, I believe so, my dear Edmund, but I have not seen him lately. At any rate, I'm sure that he has not wanted for anything during your absence. Dante smiled. My father is proud, monsieur, and even had he been in want of everything, I doubt whether he would have asked anything of anybody except God. Well then, again, this first visit has been paid. May we count on you? Once more, I must ask you to excuse me, Monsieur Morel. There is yet another visit which I am most anxious to pay. True, Dantes. I had forgotten that there is at the Catalans someone who is awaiting you with as much impatience as your father, the fair Mercedes. Dante smiled. Well, well, said the shipowner. Now I understand why she came to me 3 times for news on the Pharaon. Upon my word, Edmund, you are to be envied. She is a handsome girl, but don't let me keep you any longer. You have looked after my affairs so well that it is but your duty that you should now have time to look after your own. Are you in need of money? No, thank you, monsieur. I have all my pay from the voyage. That is nearly 3 months' salary. You are a careful fellow, Edmund. Say rather that I have a poor father. Yes, yes. I know you are a good son. Off you go to your father. I too have a son, and I should be very angry with anyone who kept him away from me after a 3 month voyage. I have your leave, monsieur, said the young man, saluting. Yes, if you have nothing more to say to me. By the way, before Captain Leclerc died, did he give you a letter for me? He was unable to write, monsieur. But that reminds me, I shall have to ask you for a fortnight's leave. To get married, first of all, and then for a journey to Paris. Very well. Take what time you need. It will take us quite 6 weeks to unload the cargo, and we shall not be ready to put to sea again for another 3 months. But you must be back in 3 months, for the Pharaon cannot sail without her captain. he added, patting the young sailor on the back. Without her captain, did you say? Cried Dantes, his eyes sparkling with joy. Oh, if you really mean that, monsieur, you are touching on my fondest hopes. Is it really your intention to make me captain of the Pharaon? If it depended on me alone, my dearest Dantes, I should give you my hand saying it is settled. But I have a partner, and you know the Italian proverb, Chi ha compagno ha padrone, which means he who has a partner has a boss. But half the battle is won since you already have my vote. Leave it to me to get my partners for you. Now, off you go. I shall remain here a while and go over the accounts with Donglers. By the by, were you satisfied with him on the voyage? That depends on what you mean by the question. If you mean as comrade, I must say no, for I do not think he has been my friend, even since the day I was foolish enough to propose to him that we should stop for 10 minutes at the Isle of Monte Cristo to settle a little dispute. I never ought to have made the suggestion, and he was quite right in refusing. If you mean as pursuer, I have nothing to say against him, and I think you will be satisfied with the way in which he has discharged his duties. Thereupon the young sailor jumped into the boat, seated himself in the stern, and ordered the oarsmen to pull him ashore at the Canebre. With a smile on his lips, M. Morel glanced after him till he saw him jump ashore. There he was immediately lost in the motley crowd that, from 5 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock in the evening, collects in that famous street at the Canebre, of which the modern Pokeans, Pokians, but Phocians are so proud that they say in all seriousness, and with that peculiar accent which lends so much character to what they say. If Paris owned the Canebre, she would be a little Marseille. On turning round, the ship owner saw Danglars standing behind him. The latter, who appeared to be awaiting his orders, was in reality like him, following the movements of the young sailor. But how different was the expression in the eyes of each of those two men as they gazed after Dante's retreating figure. That concludes chapter 1. Ooh, spooky spookiness. So you have the introduction of Edmund and his comrade at the time. So is his name Dante's Edmund or Edmund Dante? I think it's Edmund Dante's, right? Hmm, interesting. Yeah, because they don't say his like full name quite yet, do they? They either expressly call him one or the other. It's either Dante's or Edmund. Dante's. Ah, that is you, Dante's. Yeah, so Dante's is probably his first name. So he's well, Monsieur Edmund, lied the owner. So yeah, it's Dante's Edmund. For chapter 2. This one's not a long chapter, I think. Yeah, it's only a couple pages long. Father and son. Let us leave Donglers struggling with his feeling of hatred and trying to whisper some evil insinuation against his comrade into their master's ear, and let us follow Dantes, who, after having run along the Canebre, turned down the Rue Noailles. Here he entered a small house situated to the left of the Alleys de Melhan. ran up the 4 flights of dark stairs, and, trembling with excitement, stopped before a half open door which revealed the interior of the little room. Hmm. It was the room which Dante's father inhabited. The news of the Pharaon's arrival had not yet reached the old man, who was mounted on a chair and with a hand trembling with old age, was busy staking some nasturtiums that, intermingled with the clematis, climbed up the trellis before his window. Suddenly he felt an arm thrown around him, and a well-known voice called out, "Father, my dear old dad." With a cry of joy, the old man turned round and saw his son. Pale and visibly trembling, he threw his arms round him. "What ails you, father?" the young man anxiously inquired. "Are you ill?" "No, no, my dear Edmund, my boy, my son, not at all. But I was not expecting you, and the joy at suddenly seeing you again has given me rather shock." "Well, calm yourself, father. It is really I. They say that joy never harms anyone. So I came in without any warning. I have come back, and we are going to be happy together." "That's right, my boy," replied the old man. "But in what way are we going to be happy? Are you not going to leave me any more? Come now, tell me how you have fared." "May God forgive me that I should rejoice in good fortune, brought about by another's death. Goodness knows I never sought it. It has happened, and I've not the strength to regret it. Our good old Captain Leclerc is dead. Father, it is probable that with Monsieur Morel's assistance, I shall take his place. Do you understand, father? A captain at 20, with a salary of 100 louis, besides a share in the profits. Isn't it really more than a poor sailor like me could hope for?" "Yes, my son, yes, it certainly is," said the old man. "With my first pay, I shall buy you a little house with a garden where you can plant your clematis, your nasturtiums, and your honeysuckle. But, father, what is the matter? You don't look well." "It is nothing. It will soon pass," said the old man, but his strength failed him, and he fell backwards. "This will never do," exclaimed the youth. "A glass of wine will soon put you right. Tell me where you keep it," continued, opening one cupboard after another. "It is useless to look for it," said the old man. "There is no wine." "What? No wine?" said the young man, turning pale and looking first at the old man's sunken and pale cheeks and then at the bare cupboard. "No wine? Have you been in want of money, father?" "I've not wanted anything now that you are here," said the old man. "Yet," stammered Edmund, wiping the perspiration from his brow, "yet I went away 3 months ago. I left you 200 francs." "True enough, but you forgot a little debt you owed to our neighbor Caderousse. He remembered me of it and told me that I did not pay it for you. He would go to Monsieur Morel for the money. Fearing that might do you harm, I paid it for you." "But," cried Dantes, "I owed Caderousse 140 francs. Do you mean to say that you paid him that sum out of the 200 francs I left you?" The old man nodded. So that you have lived for 3 months on 60 francs. You know that I require very little. May God forgive me, cried Edmund, throwing himself on his knees before his father. Nay, nay, said the old man, with a quiet smile. Now that you are with me again, the past is all forgotten, and all is well. Yes, said the old man, or the young man. Here I am with a little money in my pockets, and a good future before me. Here, father, take some money, take some and send for some good to eat and drink. So saying, he emptied the contents of his pockets on the table, a dozen pieces of gold, 5 or 6 crowns, and some smaller coins. His father's face brightened. Whose is that? Said he. Mine, yours, ours. Take some. Buy some provisions and be happy, for we shall have some more tomorrow. Gently, gently, said the old man, smiling. If you don't mind, I shall spend your money warily. If people see me buying too many things at a time, they will think I have to wait for your return before buying them. But hush, here comes someone. It is Candaros, who has no doubt heard of your arrival and has come to welcome you home. At that moment, Candaros entered. He was a man of 5 or 6 and 20, with a mass of black hair. He carried in his hand a piece of cloth which, in his capacity of tailor, he was going to turn into a coat lining. So, you have come back, Edmund? He said you were strong, Marceli's accent, and with a broad smile that disclosed teeth as white as ivory. Yes, as you perceive, neighbor Cadaros, and ready to serve you in any way, Dantes answered, but ill concealing his coldness by his civil words. Thank you. Happily, I am not in need of anything. It is sometimes others who have need of my assistance. Dantes might made a slight movement. But I don't mean for you, boy. I lent you money and you returned it. That was but a neighborly action, and we are now quits. We are never quits with those who oblige us, said Dantes. When we no longer owe them money, we owe them gratitude. Why speak of it? What is what is past is gone and done with. Let us talk of your happy return. It would appear that you have had a stroke of luck and are already well in Monsieur Morel's good books. Monsieur Morel has always been very kind to me. In that case, you were wrong to refuse to dine with him. What? Refuse to dine with him? Exclaimed old Dantes. So he asked you to dinner, did he? Yes, father, returned Edmund with a smile, because you know I wanted to come to you as soon as possible. I don't suppose your dear, kind Monsieur Morel was overpleased at that, said Caderousse. And of course, when a man aims at being captain, he mustn't offend his employer. You should butter him up a bit. Oh, I hope to be captain without doing that, replied Dantes. Capital. That will please your old friends, and I know someone who won't be sorry to hear it. Do you mean Mercedes? Said the old man. Yes, Edmund replied. And now that I have seen you, father, and assured myself that you are well and want for nothing, I will ask your permission to leave you for a time. I am anxious to see Mercedes. Go, my son, go, said old Dantes, and may God bless you in your wife as he has blessed me in my son. Edmund took leave of his father, nodded to Cadaros, and went out. Ataros waited a few minutes and then he also descended the stairs and joined Donglers, who had been waiting for him at the corner of the Rue Senac. Well, said Donglers, did you see him? I have just left him, said Condaros. Did he speak of his hopes of becoming captain? He spoke of it as if it were quite settled. Patience, said Danglars. It seems to me he is in too much of a hurry. But I believe Monsieur Morels has promised him the captaincy. Puh, said Danglars. He is not captain yet. Is he not in love with the beautiful Catalan? Head over here, ears. He has just gone to see her, but if I am not greatly mistaken, there's a storm brewing in that direction. What do you mean? I do not know anything for certain, but I've seen things which make me think that the future captain will not have all his way up in the Villa's infirmaries. What have you seen? Every time that Mercedes has come to town lately, she has been accompanied with a tall, gay young Catalan with black eyes and red complexion, who seems very attentive to her, and whom she addresses as cousin. Really? And do you think he is making love to her? I suppose so. What else would the man of 21 be doing with the beautiful young girl of 17? And you say Dantes has gone to the Catalans? He left before me. Let us go in the same direction. We can turn in at La Reserves and await events over a glass of wine. And that concludes chapter 2. Next time it'll be chapter 3, the Catalans. Ooh, things are getting mighty spicy, I think. So, we have a setting so far. We have Dantes, who is a prospective young man about to be made captain. And we have enemies who are wishing danger upon him. And you have rumors around town of his betrothed, or I don't even know if they're betrothed yet or anything like that. Uh, but the lady he is fond of seeing other men. We'll see on the next chapter. Leave it at a little bit of a cliffhanger for you guys. Um, if you're watching from YouTube, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Thank you so much. I'll be posting up some more chapters in the next coming days, so keep up with that. I'll be posting this on the YouTube fairly soon. But I'll see you all then, and I'll see you on the next chapter of Monte Cristo. Bye. 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 Bye.